What's up? Dylan here, and today we're going to be talking about the complete guide to becoming an iOS developer in 2025. This is a guide that I wish that I had when I first started out as an iOS developer. I've been doing this for over a decade now, and this guide will go over all of the main topics that you need to know and nothing that you don't. So I don't want you to waste any time. Let's jump right in. And don't worry about taking too many notes. I will provide you with this document in this video. Okay, so the basics. What is iOS development? iOS development is the process of building mobile apps for Apple devices such as the iPhone, iPad, and the iPod Touch. The main required skill is knowing and being familiar with the programming language, which is Swift. In older context, it's Objective-C. And yeah, those are the main two that you really need to consider. But I think for your purpose as a beginner, just focus on Swift. Um, there are required skills to understanding iOS frameworks. We're going to touch on that in later sections. Um, User interface, obviously a big portion of iOS development is the views that users are interacting with and viewing, touching, expecting certain responses. Like that user interface is the bread and butter and the core part of iOS development. So you're going to really need to have a skill set there. And honestly, the big one too is like the need to, or the want to solve problems for people and for not just your company, but for people out there. So when you're building a portfolio app, the story that you want to tell is like, hey, I built this for a reason. I built this to solve problems. People love to see that, especially hiring managers. And the time commitment here, I think it varies. If you have a lot of free time, you can knock this all out within 6 months. I'd say 3 to 6 months is pretty reasonable. But if you have a lot of responsibilities, such as you have a family to take care of, you have an existing job, and you're just doing this in your 2 hours throughout the day that you have free, it might take a little bit longer. So I'm just setting the expectations and not giving you this like false sense of this is going to be a 24-hour thing. It takes time. But anyways, if you follow the steps here and follow the framework, I think that will reduce any chances of you wasting time. Okay, so the setup. The big thing is you're going to need a Mac computer, so that could be a MacBook, a Mac Mini, running Mac Studio. I have a MacBook Pro and a MacBook Air, so that's what I use to get started. Having an iPhone or an iPad available for testing, like a physical one and not just the simulator, is very valuable, but it's optional. When I got started, I just relied heavily on the iOS simulator that comes with the software, which is what we're going to talk about now. Xcode. Xcode is the development environment where you're writing code to build the apps. You can get this for free. One thing to note here is that there's a software called Xcodes that gives you the ability to download previous Xcode versions if you want to look at different iOS versions. But I think for simplicity, just focus on the one that's in the Mac App Store. And having a Git for version control is essential to your progress as a iOS developer. It's seen as like one of the best practices in terms of like storing your work and sharing it with others, and you'll see this heavily used in the professional context. Okay, and of course, you want to install Xcode when you get an opportunity, create an Apple developer account. So it's free to start, but once you want to put apps in the App Store and distribute that amongst your user base, you'll have to pay a $99 membership fee. I think if you're serious about this and you want to go all in, I'd say go for the professional environment and pay for the $99 a year to get started. Otherwise, yeah, it's free to start. Don't let that block your progress. And yeah, you're going to open up Xcode and you're going to familiarize yourself with the interface, create a new Hello World project just to get things going, build the project, just get familiar, especially if you're coming from a different IDE. All right, so the next step in our roadmap here is learning Swift. Um, Swift actually provides you with a nice guide on how to learn, or Apple provides you with a nice guide on how to learn Swift. And I'll share that at the bottom as well. But this is the order in which I would learn it in 2025. I would focus on the fundamentals, so variables and constants, understanding the difference between the two, basic data types, the string, integer, double, boolean, collection, so array, dictionaries, sets, control flow, so if else, switch statements, functions and closures, all things that exist in other languages, but just getting familiar with how it's handled in Swift will be very valuable to you in this early part in your journey. Um, Understanding the idea of optionals and handling optionals, the difference between classes and structures and enums, properties on the models, protocols, handling errors, and a new paradigm called concurrency with async await, memory management, and ARC, so automatic reference counting. These are the only things and topics that I would focus on as a beginner looking to break into iOS development. And some projects that can keep you motivated and treat these as examples. You can build your own projects, but in order to really cement these fundamentals and these teachings, I would build like a really small project or have the goal to build a really small project that uses these topics, and that'll really cement the learning there instead of you just going through tutorials. Um, so yeah, that's how I'd get started with learning the fundamentals of the Swift language. Okay, so then once I got my feet wet with handling the Swift language and I have like a good grasp of the language, feeling really confident, I would move on to domain modeling. And this is the idea of that like you'll be representing the content and the representation of your app in in a model. It becomes the source of truth for everything that you do afterwards. So I would say like the domain models themselves are the core pieces of the application. Um, as I mentioned, they're the definitive representation of your app's data. Um, they basically control the business logic of the entire app, and they set the foundation for different layers of your iOS app, such as UI, networking, storage layer. Here are some essential components. Um, the core objects will have their own attributes or properties. Um, there's relationships to other domain models, and those can be, one to many, many to many. Um, you want to look at the ownership management between data models. A big a big thing to focus on is the difference between structs and classes. So when you when you start to dive into domain modeling, really look out for uh, using structs versus classes because this will be a question that is actually asked in the interview context. And I can follow up with a video there on an interview question that relates to structs versus classes. I think that one's really valuable and has come up many times in my interview experience. Okay, protocols, defining the contracts between different parts of the app. I think this will be very valuable to focus on when looking at domain modeling. Okay, so I'm going to show some examples here of domain models for popular and common apps. So for e-commerce, you'll typically see the following domain models: products, categories, cart, order, payment. If you can imagine, like that's where all of the the key data points of the app is being held. Same for social media. It's user, post, comment, reaction, relationships. Essentially, it's saying that like all of the properties that are valuable to show and use for a user will live in these domain models, such as what I have listed out here. So I have some examples here. Feel free to go through these, and if you have any questions about them, feel free to ask in the comments below, and I could make a follow-up video or answer your questions. Feel free to also just email me directly. Yeah, here to help. So moving along, now that we have our domain models, a key component in the development process is getting user feedback, and I like to start with the UI so I can put it into the hands of my users, and I can get quick feedback. Um, two ways of getting that quick feedback is building the views with Swift UI, and the other is building the views with UIKit. Um, before before 2023, I would say focus on UIKit because that's where a lot of the views are built for companies. I think today most apps and most companies are building views with Swift UI. So I would solely focus on Swift UI for the purposes of just getting your foot in the door and not focus on UIKit. I still think it's valuable to know, and it might even be great to have on your portfolio so a future employer can trust that you won't be overwhelmed when you see UIKit in a legacy code base. But for now, I would focus on Swift UI just to keep moving forward and getting your portfolio built. I have some tips here on what to expect with Swift UI and what to look out for. Um, I'd say the biggest piece here is that it's a declarative syntax. So what that means is that it's set up in a reactive way in terms of listening to your domain models on how to react when the user selects this or types in that. Um, yeah, it's the declarative syntax framework. SwiftUI works really nice with their layout system. You don't have to set up a tedious like auto layout system, which is what is needed for UIKit. But once again, I think focus on the simple layout system that exists for SwiftUI. There's like a lot of neat support for dark mode, dynamic typing, and localization. Animations are pretty smooth there as well in terms of setting it up. Um, I think if you do have the opportunity, I would still explore those topics in UIKit, but just getting started, I would focus on just getting things out the door with Swift UI. As I mentioned, when choosing between the two and wanting what to focus on for your portfolio projects, I would start with Swift UI, especially for new projects. And maybe if you wanted to like clone a popular app, I would start with Swift UI. And if you're finding yourself still wanting to explore UIKit, I I suggest that you maybe look at examples on GitHub. There's a lot of open source code bases out there that you could probably jump in and help support, or you could, clone it to your local machine and build out more features with UIKit. And this is stuff that companies who have been around for a long period of time will definitely value in the interview experience, that you took it upon yourself to go look at UIKit and make some changes. Okay, some design concepts to keep in mind are the human interface guidelines that's set by Apple. Um, the developer account gives you access to Apple's design recommendations, and I'd highly look at those frameworks and libraries just to see what the state of the art is when it comes to design concepts in the Apple framework. Okay, so we took a look at the view layers, and now we're going to look at the networking and the API. And this part right here is very valuable because this is how you're actually going to get your data um, from the API, from the back end to your app, and also from your app to the back end. And that orchestration of data is so important because if it's not set up correctly, you could introduce very costly bugs, and you might just have a hard time getting your portfolio out there published in the App Store or in any manner. And without that portfolio, you won't get the visibility that you need to get your foot in the door with iOS jobs. So, um, concepts to focus on when you're looking at networking and APIs is HTTP requests and all of the different commands here, such as like getting data, posting data, uploading, which is put, and deleting data. So imagine like you're deleting accounts, and patching. So if you're making an update to things, like editing, comments, etc. Working with REST APIs, I would look for open source backend or APIs that you could use in setting up like a very basic prototype. The authentication is something that's very valuable to look at. So if you have the opportunity, definitely don't shy away from setting up your own authentication on iOS. And of course, the big one is downloading and uploading files, such as like images and videos. That is a huge green flag if you're able to show this in a portfolio project. Um, for modern networking, I think for newer companies, they might be more familiar with the async await for network calls, but typically you'll just see REST APIs out there in the wild. Um, Apple really is promoting the async await mechanism moving forward to handle concurrency. So I would lean into this and build out some small projects that show that you're familiar with async await and also error handling. So if you remember correctly from the previous sections, we talked about error handling. This is where that will come into play. Um, and yeah, once again, I don't have any examples here, but if this is something that you're interested in seeing, I can create a video for this specific stuff so you can see it and know where to start and feel comfortable putting that in a portfolio project. Um, for some of these things, the setup might be a little tedious. So if you just want to like get something out the door, don't be afraid to just um, reuse third-party APIs. One big one that I've used in the past is the IMDb framework. It's like a third-party API, and I was using that to fetch movie titles and movie images um, to show like a collection of movies on the screen. That was just like a really simple portfolio project that showed that I knew how to handle authentication and also handle networking from backend to code and vice versa. And once you get familiar with these tools, you can go ahead and build out your own API client with like a networking layer that handles both request and response models. And you can mock this out with testing. I actually covered this in a previous video that I did about unit testing in iOS. Um, yeah, it's a little on the advanced side, but I think if this is something that you want to promote in your portfolio, which I highly encourage, don't shy away from testing. And yeah, there are some third-party libraries that exist out there for networking layer called AF Networking and Kingfisher. These were some of the popular ones when I was doing this back in the day, but I think these still exist and are still valuable. Okay, so working with data. I think this is still a valuable thing to have in your portfolio projects. So it's how do you handle storing data on your app? So the big one that you'll hear is user defaults, and that's for like pretty small amounts of data, such as like handling settings for notifications or preferences. Core data is another storage type that you can use. This is if you have like more complex data setups such as structured relational data like a small database. And if you want like quick fetching, sorting, and filtering without asking the backend for that information, core data will be your solution. Swift data is like a newer framework. I haven't used it personally, but I've heard good things from my peers that the setup on this is pretty streamlined and pretty seamless with Swift UI. So, and also Apple is highly promoting it or heavily promoting it. So, highly recommend at least giving it a look if you're looking for a simple setup. File Manager, I've used this a lot with images and video. Keychain for secure storage, so you'll see this used for passwords and other forms of sensitive information. With this section for both networking and storage, you'll get very familiar with the codable protocol and how it decodes and encodes information from domain to backend and vice versa, and handling custom data formats. Okay, so just to recap, we've covered domain modeling, we've covered networking layer, we've covered the storage layer, and now we want to orchestrate all of this. And the way I would kind of think about this this setup as a beginner is that these are like the design patterns that the developer has at their disposal. Think of it as like a tool set to orchestrate this entire application. And there are several common ones that you'll find in the industry. And I would focus on only these three. And there are so many out there, but the reason why I would focus on these three is like one, your speed to getting your portfolio out the door is like the most important thing right now for you. And two, a lot of your interviewers will have seen these like patterns before, so they'll be familiar and know what you're talking about in the interview. So I would focus on these three. So the first one is the model view controller pattern, and this is like one of the first patterns that Apple really promoted when the mobile app development scene was just getting kicked off. And going back to the sections that we've already covered, the modeling part of this pattern handles the data and the business logic. The views handle the user interface elements. The controller is like the bridge between the two that handles the coordination of data between models and views, and view actions and view behaviors to the models. So there's a lot of well-documented code bases out there that show really good and really clean usage of MVC. The cons are that like they can be taken advantage of if you're not careful. You can see situations where a lot of business logic gets put into the controller. But in my experience, that can be quickly combated with just setting up very clean separation between different layers of the application. And you can have a very clean code base with MVC. So you'll hear this term of massive view controller problem being thrown out a lot, and it even comes up in the coding interview. But just know that there is a solution for that, and it's just to have clean separation between different layers of the code base and loose coupling. Okay, so moving on to model view model. This is probably the most widely used pattern today in industry. It's very similar to the MVC, except that in place of a controller, you'll have what is called a view model that handles all of the presentation logic, and that handles the transformation from model data to the views themselves, and it also handles the view state logic for the views themselves. So it really works well with Swift UI, given the declarative syntax and the reactive nature of it all. What you'll find too is that the testability of the MVVM pattern is a lot simpler to set up. I don't think it's necessarily better, but it's a lot easier to kind of see the good practices of writing a maintainable and clean code base, because it really promotes the separation of concerns between different layers of the application. So the cons are that if not done correctly, similar to the MVC pattern, it can lead to a lot more boilerplate code, and some might find the learning curve to be a little steep. But yeah, if that feels like a very daunting, just let me know in the comments and I can create a video just on MVVM and maybe even MVC on how to set these up correctly with like a full um, a full example of like a production environment application. And last but not least, you'll see clean architecture where, as we talked about previously, you'll see like a very clear separation of concerns between all of the different layers, the layers being domain, data, views, or presentation, service layers. They have what is known as like use cases and entities, and essentially that's just saying the business logic of the application. And what you'll find with clean architecture is that it's very, very testable and very scalable. Um, I think some of the cons are that not many people have used it, and it might be a little overkill for like a portfolio project or for a small team that's working on like a small project. Um, so to bring this all home, when choosing with an architecture, if you're a beginner, I'd say start with MVC or MVVM. If you want to take the challenge of working with a larger application or something more complex, or just like wanting to do it out of pure interest, I would then evaluate using clean architecture. And yeah, I think Swift UI works really well with MVVM. Um, so here I talked about some core iOS frameworks. UI Kit's a little bit older, Swift UI. Okay, so I think another key point that we need to discuss when becoming a iOS developer in 2025 is the App Store and distribution side of things. What's really neat is that today it is so simple to get an app in the App Store, just so straight up and so straightforward. I think in the past it took fighting tooth and nail um, to get your app in the App Store, and what this means is that like having this flexibility of getting a app in the App Store, even in test flight, quickly will set up like a new developer like yourself to sharing that with a potential employer very quickly, and it really shows like a high level of professionalism that will beat a GitHub repo any day of the week. Um, so I think when you're considering App Store and distribution, think of it as like a win for being professional and standing out with other candidates in the interview process. You'll definitely need the Apple developer account that we talked about, the $99 a year. Honestly, guys, just do it. It's worth it if you want to go into this profession. Um, so here I just talk about like what to expect with the App Store, several distribution methods. So once again, you have the App Store distribution, but you also have TestFlight. And what I love about TestFlight is that you can set up testing groups and you can invite people via email, like links to download your app and test it out. So if you were reaching out to a potential employer, you could just send them a link and say, hey, like this is what the app would look like if I worked for your company. Really strong, really strong case for this because you will stand out as someone who's taking this very seriously. Okay. Things to just know about signing certificates. There's a lot of documentation on that online, but um, if you need any help setting all this stuff up, just reach out to me or leave a comment. And yeah, I think we talked about it high level, but I just want to give you all like maybe some more actionable step-by-step guidelines on what to do on each section. And what you'll see is that a lot of this is very project-based because the tutorial stuff is great and all, but it mostly just like exposes you to something, but it doesn't give you that tangible asset that you can take to a future employer and say, hey, like this is what I built, and this is what I learned while I was building it, and those learnings and understandings I can bring to your company and be an asset. So let's go through this real quick. Uh, the Swift language fundamentals, like I said, these are all examples, so you could choose to use them, or you could just treat them as like something to think about and model after. So yeah, Swift language fundamentals. I would just build like a simple calculator that focuses on the Swift syntax, functions, control flow, variables, and error handling. For domain modeling, let's say we were looking at building a book or movie collection tracker. The models can be representing books and movies, and you can talk about the relationships between different objects throughout the app, such as like authors, genres. These could all be different data structures. And here I would just focus on like organizing the data. Um, UI, we could build like a simple prototype for showing the weather. Um, you can also like interweave like navigation into that as well. So moving from one screen to another, and handling custom UI components, and of course like practicing your layout skills with different device orientations. So there's like the portrait mode, there's the landscape mode, there's different device sizes. So um, how does your UI respond to each of those scenarios? Um, and yeah, networking. Let's take a look at that. So I would do like maybe like a simple newsreader app and just fetch data from open API like newsapi.org. You want to handle like the decoding of the JSON responses into like a codable domain model that we already have some experience working on. And as you can see, guys, like the projects kind of build on themselves. You know, it's like one project will build the confidence for you to make the next, and all the way down to um, these different layers, and eventually to the App Store. So for the networking, I would get comfortable dealing with backend responses and showing articles and UI elements based on the backend response. For data storage, I would do my best to showcase a project that handles offline mode. So if there were no networking available, how would my app still be able to run? And once again, like the potential employers would love to see that. Handling core data or Swift data, an architecture implementation. I would build like one app with different design patterns such as MVC, MVVM, and potentially even clean architecture. And yeah, lastly, team, like once you have all these elements put together, there's nothing stopping you from putting this in the App Store besides an account. Um, and you'll get familiar with handling, adding an app icon, a launch screen, error handling, writing privacy policies. Like these are directly related to the job as an iOS developer and engineer, and submitting to the App Store, handling App Store reviews. Like this is gold. So yeah, we kind of covered a bunch of projects that you could use. The main takeaway is that you need to build a portfolio, and you have nothing stopping you based on this document. You know, there's a lot of content here for you to like deep dive into and build out your portfolio. Have like a polished App Store app, a pretty well written and well documented GitHub repo, some code samples, and some prototypes that you can show to potential employers. With each piece of asset that you make sure it's well documented. You could add like architecture diagrams showing different design patterns and how you built something, case studies on your process and the challenges you overcame, testing and debugging, unit testing. I think once you submit your first app into the App Store, I would then focus on testing and debugging, because as a result, you will inevitably run into some bugs, and you can tell the story of like, hey, like I published this app in the App Store and I got this review and it highlighted this bug that I didn't see when writing my code. So what I did was like I went and learned about unit testing, and I implemented this unit test suite in my app, pushed it to the App Store, and I no longer have that bug, and I have a happy customer who updated their App Store review. So all of these things, guys, like the things that you're doing and learning can tell a really compelling story as to why that company needs to hire you. Snapshot testing, same thing. I actually have a video on testing, so I'll link that on the bottom in the description as well. But if you have any questions or want to see anything else, just feel free to leave a comment and let me know. And once again, guys, like don't take any notes here. Like I will be sharing this guide with you. Debugging tools, you just want to get familiar with the Xcode debugger and breakpoints if things break. Trying to understand like where they broke is really key. TDD, I talk about this in the testing video, so that'll be available there as well. Okay, so once you have all this, you have the assets in place. Like, how do you find your first iOS developer job? I think one, you really want to get familiar with all of the different forums that exist out there and job boards, especially. So you're going to be looking for these titles: junior iOS developer, iOS engineer, mobile developer, Swift developer. I think for larger companies, they have them tiered by levels. So look for like L1 through L3. Um, if you're on online job boards such as LinkedIn, Indeed, um, Y Combinator also has one too. You'll see the required skills in the job description, and I promise you, all of it will be found up here. I can 100% guarantee that all of the required skills that they're looking for can be demonstrated through your portfolio projects that were listed in this guide. So, like I said, guys, everything we're doing here is for a reason, and it's to get you a job. Okay, I'm gonna come back here. Okay, there are some developer communities that have helped me out in the past. I was just like getting to know like what the current trends are for hiring and which companies might be looking for more iOS engineers. Here are a few of them, like the iOS Dev Happy Hour team. There are some Slack servers for iOS developers and local Swift meetups. If you're fortunate enough to live in like a big city like SF or New York, um, you can go on meetup.com and see if you can find like any Swift or iOS meetups. Okay, networking. You could follow some pretty known iOS developers and companies. And I think sometimes like you'll see big accounts like retweet job openings. I do that at the very least. I'm no like Twitter influencer by any means, but I have like a pretty significant following, and that has helped me a lot to just kind of um, see what other jobs are hiring for iOS engineers, and also just like um, passing it forward to other aspiring engineers of just like sharing companies that are hiring. GitHub contributions. This is like probably one of the more underrated ways to like find a job is to like just contribute in public open source GitHub repos. Um, yeah, I've been seeing that more often in the last year. Just that like folks who are showing a lot of activity on their GitHub don't even have to go through like the full interview process. Like it's like, hey, I trust your code. I see your code in this open source repository, and I trust that you'll be an asset to this company. So this one's highly underrated. Interview prep. Yeah, you can do a lot of. You can find some like YouTube channels and some resources online on like how to prep for interviews. But honestly, guys, like when I first got my first job, I didn't know of like any interview prep resources. It all just came from my experience, and I had contracted a bit for like maybe 2 years, and when I went for like my first full time role, everything that you see listed here was from my real world experience through like my personal projects, like my contract roles, and I I was able to answer these questions with confidence, just because I had so much demonstrated experience working on these things by myself. So I do think that like finding these challenges and questions and prep material online is valuable. I won't discount that, but there's no substitute for just actually doing it. And I've listed all the resources that you need to actually do it and learn the material that will be sought after in the interview prep or the interviews. There's some official resources that you can use. We talked about some of them already: the Apple Developer Documentation, Swift.org, Apple Design Human Interface Guidelines. Here's some books that helped me. They were, yeah, they were like gold. Um, Swift Programming by the Big Nerd Ranch Guide, the iOS Programming by the same company, iOS 14 by Matt Newman. That was super clutch for building out complex UI with UIKit. Um, and yeah, when I was first starting out, I was pretty broke, and I didn't have any money, and I really struggled to like find the resources that I need to build apps, especially to build out my portfolio. And one resource that I used was the Stanford University CS 193P class. And yeah, I just basically locked myself in a room that weekend and just did everything that they did in that course. And after that weekend, I shared what I built with like a potential employer, and they were just blown away. Um, so yeah, you could get lucky like that where you find like the perfect resource for you that works for you, and it ends up changing your life. And that course CS193P definitely changed my life. I think it's on YouTube now, and I think they may have updated it for SwiftUI. But when I used it, I think it was on iTunes U back in the day. Yeah, sorry, I get a little choked up telling that story because like I think without me taking that initiative, I wouldn't have gotten to where I am today. I think I was so overwhelmed in that course too. I was like, wow, I have no idea what's happening, but I knew that it was going to be difficult, but I just kept pushing even though I didn't feel like I knew what I was doing, and it paid off. So I encourage you, if you have any issues or if you're running any obstacles like that, just keep going. Just don't let it stop you. We all feel this way. Like I'm a senior engineer with 10 years of experience, and yeah, it's real. Cadeco, which was formerly known as RayWenderlich.com, that was a very valuable resource. They had really good resources on setting up Firebase to connect with like a backend. That was really clutch for me in building out my prototypes in my portfolio. And some other tools that I think were valuable to me as a beginner were Figma. I think back then I had Sketch, um, Postman for API testing, Proxyman for network debugging, Firebase, as I just mentioned, for backend services to quickly spin one up. I think you can also use like Supabase today. Um, Maybe another thing I'll talk about in a future video is like using AI to set up some of these things. That'll be really valuable for you as well. So I just want to conclude this video by saying that like getting to this point in the video just shows me that like you have what it takes to um, become an iOS developer in 2025. Like you're not in it for quick wins. Like you want to do the hard work and you want to dedicate a significant amount of time to this. Uh, I want to be that person to help you out. So if if you found this valuable, definitely download this. Feel free to send me an email, leave a comment, ask me anything that you want to ask. Like what videos do you want to see? What content is confusing to you? Is there anything that I could elaborate more on? Yeah, I didn't have this, and I think it would have shrunk the time it took to me becoming like a senior, highly paid senior engineer. And I'm really big on mentorship, so this is like this is something I'm really passionate about. So don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help. I'm here for help. So yeah, my name's Dylan. Thank you for listening to this video, and I hope you have a great day, and I hope you found this valuable. Thank you.